So we're diving into this idea that the West always insisted democracy was like the only true path to prosperity, but then China kind of flipped the script, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's fascinating how the narrative shifts when you look at the Chinese model. They've
Right.
managed to achieve remarkable growth and stability with an entirely different system.
Yeah, it's like the one party system in China really challenged the widely accepted notion that liberal democracy is the golden ticket for success.
Definitely. And it's interesting because this isn't just about economic growth, it's also about how governance can take on many forms.
Exactly. Right. The argument here is that China, through its one party system, has proven that alternative forms of governance, not democracy, can produce extraordinary results, both in economic performance and social stability.
And I mean, think about it. For decades, Western ideology pushed democracy as this universal solution. But China seems to be saying, hey, look at us. We're thriving on our own terms.
Exactly, and it's not like this is a sudden coincidence. It's been built over time with deliberate policies and a kind of centralized planning mindset that some argue has allowed them to like respond to challenges more swiftly than some democracies can.
Right, though, wouldn't you say that sometimes that centralization might risk suppressing individual freedoms? I mean, there's always that trade off discussion, isn't there?
Absolutely. And that's a key point. For instance, while the Chinese system has delivered growth, critics argue it also limits pluralism and free expression. But the proponents say that, stability is the price you pay, and it might well be a viable trade off in certain contexts.
And I think what really adds spice to this discussion is the book talk by Eric Lee, Party Life, Chinese Governance, and the World Beyond Liberalism. It seems to encapsulate this debate nicely.
Right. That book really brings into focus how China's governance model isn't just about economic metrics. It's about a completely alternative worldview. It's like they're saying, we've got
Yeah,
our own blueprint.
exactly. And it's bold because it essentially questions, if not outright challenges, the idea that there's only one correct form of government. That's pretty head turning, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it kind of asks, could other nations under different circumstances learn something from this alternative model? Or is it a unique, context specific approach? It opens up so many questions.
It's really a paradigm shift. I mean, think about how this challenges decades of Western political thought. But is it truly replicable elsewhere, or is it just a remarkable anomaly?
That's a great question. You see, China's model works within a very specific cultural, historical, and social framework. It's like not necessarily a one size fits all
Right,
solution, but at the same time, it does expose some vulnerabilities in the so called universal system of liberal democracy.
exactly. And this leads to a kind of respectful debate. Should the West then rethink its approach, or are these just um, two completely different systems aiming for different end goals?
Yeah, it's like comparing apples and oranges. The Western focus on, electoral politics, separation of powers, and so on, versus a system where decision making is more centralized and long term policy planning might be more effective in achieving rapid growth.
And there's that point about stability. The argument goes that the one party system can enforce policy changes more decisively, which is sometimes exactly what a country needs in turbulent times.
Right, exactly. It reminds me a bit of how sometimes in sports you need a playbook that's rigid to win games, even though it might not allow for improvisation like in
Yeah,
free-form jazz. Stability is sometimes about knowing what to expect.
that's a nice analogy. But, one point that can't be ignored is the question of human rights and freedom. Doesn't the trade off in China's system, where some personal freedoms are relinquished, undermine long term social innovation and creativity?
That's the classic counter-argument, right? And I think it's a valid concern. While China's system appears to provide concrete economic benefits and stability, critics say that the lack of political pluralism might eventually curb innovation and lead to a sort of social stagnation.
Exactly. And It's also worth noting that sometimes rapid economic growth can lead to other kinds of societal pressures like, I don't know, income inequality or environmental challenges.
True, true. So while China's system has its merits, it's not without its complications. And it forces us to, re-examine what we mean by success in governance. Is it just economic metrics, or do we have to consider freedom, creativity, and social harmony as well?
Yeah, it's like a balancing act. And if you look at how the discussion is framed, especially in that video, it comes across as a provocative invitation to rethink our models rather than painting one as inherently superior.
Exactly. It's provoking us to ask, could there be a middle ground? Or are we, chained to the democratic narrative because it's been the dominant historical perspective in the West for so long?
And sometimes that dominant narrative might blind us to alternative solutions that could work better under different circumstances. It's almost like saying, hey, maybe we need to think outside of the democratic box.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this debate also ties into global power dynamics. With the rise of China on the world stage, if its model continues, the influence of liberal democracies might be challenged in a very real way.
Right. And this isn't just an internal Chinese issue, it has global ramifications. It forces the rest of the world to reassess what works best for them, especially under the shadow of rapid technological and economic changes.
Exactly. And that brings us to the point where this isn't just academic debate. It's about practical outcomes, how societies structure themselves, allocate resources, and respond to challenges. It's a concrete discussion with real life impacts.
Definitely. And while we can admire China's growth and stability, we must also be cautious of oversimplifying it as a universal model. It's context dependent and comes with its own set of challenges and risks.
Right, right. And I think that's where the respectful critique comes in. There's a valid argument on both sides. Western democracies have their own set of challenges, especially when it comes to polarization and slow decision-making processes.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes you have to wonder if the inefficiencies in liberal democracies might actually be an admission that no system is perfect.
Right, it really is a classic case of no free lunch. Every system has its trade-offs. And this video really highlights that dynamic by showcasing China as a case study that defies the conventional wisdom.
Yeah, and to that, while I appreciate the perspective of challenging the Western narrative, I feel like we also have to be careful not to idealize any system without considering its long-term consequences. For instance, potential risks to innovation or civil liberties in a highly controlled state.
Absolutely, that's the balance we need to strike. It's like we have to be open-minded enough to recognize that the West isn't the sole blueprint for progress, but also critically aware that every system, including China's one-party approach, comes with inherent challenges that can't be
Absolutely.
ignored.